totally botched the high five at Tejas. All right. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm Bramus. I'm with the Chrome DevRel team. CSS, if you have questions about CSS, ask Miriam, because she knows a lot about it. I'll be the second best option, maybe. Oh no, Hidde knows a lot about CSS. I'll be like the third best option, maybe. Yeah. I'm on socials, whatever. I have a blog. Check it out. You know how it goes. Motion warning. Oh, by the way, I spent yesterday evening adding a 40% black overlay onto all of my slides to pull it down. This is okay, right? If not, I can quickly adjust all the slides. Let's not do that. Motion warning. Stuff will move around on the screen. Scroll-driven animations. It has animations in there, such as this one. Wow! This is a recreation of cover flow that you might have seen on iTunes back in the day, where you could like flick through your album. Spoiler, this is built with HTML and CSS, no JavaScript. Even the little reflection at the bottom there, it's one declaration. Look it up, WebKit box reflect something something. It's so cool. Here's another website. As I'm scrolling, columns move in different directions. Another one, I'm scrolling here, I'm scrolling down, and content moves horizontally instead of vertically. Another demo, as I scroll, the text reveals itself. And I think I have a next one. Yeah, there's another one. As I scroll really hard, like the content becomes desaturated and blurred. And if I scroll slowly, it's like less desaturated. If I scroll really, really quickly, it also skews a little bit. What all these demos have in common is that they are scroll-driven animations. Which means that as you scroll the scroll container, there's an animation that scrubs forwards or backwards in direct response. And if you say that to your team, you're the stand-up, you're discussing things, your JavaScript expert colleague will be like, hey, just install this npm package, right? And you're done. Add it to your site, boom, it works. But maybe you have a smarter JavaScript expert colleague on your team that says, oh, no need for this whole package thing. Like this little JavaScript here will do. And he gives you this little snippet, which tracks. Well, this works, right? It adds an event listener to the document, and then it tracks the scroll position, and then it updates like a transform in this case. Like, this is totally working code. But there is an issue with it, because JavaScript runs. Oh, you can see it here. I'm going way too fast. So you can see it here. Like this works, right? As I am scrolling down or up, the reading indicator at the top moves along with it in direct response. Like this is nice. But there is an issue with it, because your JavaScript runs on the main thread. And the main thread is this magic place where everything happens for your website. Style computation, layout happens there, paint, capturing input as well, JavaScript processing, and so on. And the problem with this main thread is that it's one single thread. So if it's busy with doing one thing, it can't do something else. And if you're then exceeding your frame budget of 16 milliseconds, if your JavaScript takes more than 16 milliseconds, you will see dropped frames. You will have jank on your website. And I have it here in this demo. I click the button to add jank, which in a while loop like processes something and then it yields back to the main thread. And you can see that the navigation, the animation like stalls a little bit. So we are having jank on this page. And that's unfortunate. Now, thankfully, about a decade ago, there were some bright engineers that said like, hey, we already have several ways to animate things on the web. Like instead of you adding this scroll listener and then doing the computation yourself and then changing something, we have CSS animations on the web. And not only do we have CSS animations on the web, we also have the Web Animations API. And this thing already knows how to do some animations, not all, but certain animations on the compositor, so not on the main thread. So if you're, for example, doing a transform or changing the opacity or doing a translate, that will run on the compositor and not on the main thread. So your animations can do all kinds of crazy stuff. If you have jank, your animations won't. Well, if you have something that is blocking your main thread, your animations won't be janky. So they were like, okay, we have these CSS animations, these WAPI animations. They're quite clever. What if we gave you something, and then you can have a scroll-driven animation as a result of that? Cut to many years later, this thing came out. It's a scroll-driven animation specification. It's a web standard. It's developed at the CSS working group. And what this thing gives you, it replaces all those question marks. It's giving you a scroll timeline and a view timeline, which you can combine with a CSS animation or a WAPI animation, and then you can have a scroll-driven animation. And this is really, really cool. Browser support looks like this. So we have it in Chrome 1.15. Firefox has an experimental implementation, which you can try out in Nightly. Warning though, it's not feature complete, like they don't support animation range, which I will be showing you. And then Safari currently has it available in Safari Technology Preview for you to try out. And this is really, really exciting because these are animations driven by scroll, running off the main thread on the compositor without the need for any JavaScript. I know this is JSHeroes, so good thing. There's also a JavaScript API included, so you can create new scroll timeline instances and attach these to all your animations. That's also perfectly possible, but I'm a CSS nerd, so I will be focusing on the CSS part here. Two things I want to say, though, is first of all, respect the user. So if they are not okay with motion, then don't show them all these flashy, crazy animations. So you can check it in CSS using that media query prefers reduced motion, and you can also check it in JavaScript. And then the second thing I want to mention is that because browser support is a bit spotty right now, it's not supported in all browsers. One, you could be perfectly fine with this because this is a progressive enhancement. You could think of it as a progressive enhancement. And you can detect it again in CSS and in JavaScript as well. So if the browser speaks scroll-driven animations, you can give them the scroll-driven animations. If not, think of it as a progressive enhancement, or maybe load up a polyfill or a library that provides you the functionality. So intro, let's look into a scroll timeline. This is the official definition for it. A scroll timeline tracks the progress of a scroller as you are scrolling from the start of the scroller to the end of the scroller. So in a vertical scroller, that's from the top of the scroller to the very bottom, and you also have it in a horizontal one that's from the very left to the very right. This text is a bit boring. Let me just show you, right? I'm a visual person. I like to see this. So as I am scrolling down to the bottom of the page, or any scroller for that matter, it doesn't need to be the document itself. It can be any div that has a bit of overflow going on, or any other element that has overflow going on with scroll. So as I scroll down, it goes from 0 to 100%. Then if I scroll back up, it counts down again from 100% to 0%. And if I stop somewhere in the middle, it's like, okay, you're at halfway, so that's 50% of the scroll progress that you have done. And here's an example that's using that, right? This is with the scroll-driven animations API with CSS. As I'm scrolling down, this progress bar updates in direct response. The code behind this looks like this. We position the progress bar or this reading indicator at the very top of the page. We postfix it, and then we start off with some keyframes and some declarations to attach an animation to it. Now this animation right now, this one runs on the document timeline, and it takes 2 seconds. So if I load this, the page will run the animation for 2 seconds. If I refresh the page, then it will rerun that animation. If I refresh again, it will again rerun it for a duration of 2 seconds. That is because it's using the document timeline, but we can add a different timeline to that. We can use animation timeline to add a different type of timeline to that. And to create one that responds to scroll, we have a new function available in CSS, which is named scroll, that accepts 2 arguments, the axis and the scroller. And this will create a scroll timeline that tracks the scroller's progress and then automatically updates the animation to it. So you combine the 2, animation timeline, and then scroll, something, the axis and the scroller. The parameters look like this. The axis is which axis you want to track. So by default, it's a block one. Which in our Western world here is when you scroll from the top of the scroller to the very bottom. But the cool thing is that this responds to direction on your website. So if you're, for example, are visiting a website that is in Japanese, then the block and inline axis will flip and stuff like that. And you can also use Y or X, but I always use a block and inline. And then the second argument is a scroller, which is like, which scroller do you want to track? By default, it's a nearest scroller. So if you add this animation timeline with your animation to a certain element, it will look up its nearest parent ancestor scroller that is a scroller. And then root is a root scroller, so that's the document itself. And then self is track me, myself. It's a bit confusing maybe, so here's a little code example. So here I have a div with an animation timeline scroll. Its nearest ancestor scroller, well, that's the wrapper div, just above it, because it has overflow scroll. And if you want to find the root scroller, well, that's the document. Well, technically it's a document element, but that's the root scroller. So that's what these keywords mean. So we had our animation there. This is the shorthand. We add our animation timeline to it. And we say block root, because that was for our reading indicator, right? We want to track the document as you're scrolling it in the block direction. So you can write a block root, but you can also write root block. You can flip them around. CSS is flexible. Now, because seconds have no meaning here, like the duration that I have there, these 2 seconds, you can just omit it. And voila, you have added a scroll-driven animation to your website. Crazy, right? If you want to be a bit more explicit about the duration, you can also set animation duration to auto, and that way you know like things are automatically getting determined by this scroll function. Because we are tracking the root one, but this progress bar is also its nearest ancestor scroller is also the root one. We can change this to scroll block nearest, because it happens to be the same scroller. And because these are default arguments, you can also just omit them, and then we just have animation timeline scroll, so our code in the end is even shorter. And there we have it. As I scroll from the top of the page to the bottom, again, this thing responds in direct response. So the TLDR of all this is you have an existing animation, you drop the duration, you set the timeline, and you're done. That's how you add scroll-driven animations to your website. Cool. So this was an anonymous scroll timeline. We are like creating a scroll timeline on the fly. If you want to be explicit about which scroller you are targeting, which can be the case because you can have an element inside of a scroller, inside of another scroller, inside of the root scroller. If you want to target that middle scroller, well, you have to refer to it by name. And you can do it by giving the thing an explicit scroll timeline name and an axis, or you can use a shorthand, which I will be showing you here. Yeah, you can use a shorthand scroll timeline. You give it a name and a direction. And then instead of using the scroll function, you are referring to that scroller by its name, -- root scroller. Yes, it needs to have the 2 dashes in the front. It's a dashed ident. It's like a special version of a custom ident. It needs the 2 dashes, mainly for detecting which one you are, what you are referring to, because you can also flip the arguments in the values in the shorthand. That's why you need it. So to be clear, yes, this has a lot of overlap syntax-wise with custom properties, but they are not custom properties, so you don't need the var function here. With var, you are substituting a custom property with its eventual computed value. Here you are just using it as a name, and then you can refer to that name. You can tell by the fact that the -- thingy is at the right hand of the column and not to the left of it. So it's a value, it's not a property. Here's another example that I have. As I am scrolling the page, like this is an article type of thing. As I'm scrolling down, like this fixed height cover thing, or like this cover card becomes a fixed header. I kind of like this. This is pretty sweet. So we can use scroll-driven animations for this, right? Because this responds to scroll. We start off with this thing, the cover card, plus fix it, height of 100 VH. Then we have our animation that we add to it. So we are shrinking it from 100 VH to 10 VH. That's the remainder that we want to have. And we are using the scroll function nearest block to make it scroll-driven. Does this work? Not entirely, not exactly, because there's a small problem with it. And you might see like it's going a bit too slow. As I am scrolling down, yes, it is shrinking, but it only has shrunk by the time I've reached the very bottom of the page. And you can see that the text is crawling underneath the thing as it is shrinking, which is not good. What we want to do, instead of like saying, like, hey, you animate as you're scrolling from the top of the scroller to the very bottom of the scroller, we want to have it animate over a shorter distance. We want it to animate from, as you're scrolling, from a scroll offset of 0 pixels to 90 VH. 90 VH, magic number, yes, it's the original size, which was 100 VH, minus the remaining size, which was 10 VH, so we end up with 90. So we want to do this. We want to have a scroll-driven animation, but we want it to run over a shorter scroll distance. And for that, we have animation range, which is another property that you can use. The initial value is normal, which is a shorthand, because you can also write normal. And the first normal is for the animation range start, and the second normal is for the animation range end. So that's determining like, when should this thing start and when should it end, which two scroll offsets do you want to target. So normal, that's the initial value. You can also add your own values in there. You can say, well, normal, so by default it's 0 to 100%. The first normal is 0%, the second normal is 100%. That's a default range you are tracking, but you can write your own values in there. So you can do something like 100px to 500px, which means that as you are scrolling and you are reaching a scroll offset of 100 pixels, then the animation will start. And it will be finished by the time you are reaching a scroll offset of 500 pixels. So for my example that I had, I want to set it to 0VH, 90VH. And that way the animation will run from start to finish, but over a shorter scroll distance. We chuck it in there, and our code now works. There you have it. You can see the text is no longer crawling underneath the cover card, which is awesome. I love the applause, by the way. It's like, you're so high energy all. View timeline. So I've talked about scroll timeline. There's another thing that we are having. A view timeline, which also responds to scroll, but it's a little bit different. Instead of tracking the scroller from the start to the finish, this thing will track a subject as it is crossing the scroll port. And you can see it here. I have a green box that is crossing the scroll port. And you will see that if I start at the top, it's still 0%, and it's only when this subject is crossing the scroll port that it starts at 1%, and then it counts up. And by the time it has left the scroll port, it's at 100%, even though I have a little bit of scroll state below, which is nice. So this thing is a vertical scroller. It also works horizontally. Like if I then scroll to the right, like as this subject is entering this scroll port, and then if I scroll back to the other side, it will count up again. It can count down again, yeah, from 100% to 0. And here's the demo that I've shown you already that is using this. It is adding an animation to each and every card or each and every album cover that you see there based on its position within the scroller. The keyframes look like this. So at 0%, the album cover is facing you this way. At 50%, it's facing you that way. And then by the time it's 100%, it's facing you from the other side. So instead of using scroll, which created a scroll timeline, we will be creating a view timeline. And for that, we have obviously named the view function. And we pass in an inline there because we don't want to track the block direction, which was the default one. We want to track the inline axes. Animation timeline view, rotate cover, and so on. Now, you might be wondering, like, okay, whoa, there's something weird going on because, well, something funny might be going on. Because as you are scrolling, these cards rotate, which means like their position, their relative position within the scroller also changes. So wouldn't it like have loops going on to detect the position? Well, the answer is no, because the start and end offsets are calculated against the untransformed box. And here I'm visualizing it. So the blue outlines that you see, those are the untransformed boxes of these images. So even though I'm rotating and scaling these images, because they are just transforms, it's still using the original position, which was the blue one. And then the green outline is our scroller, obviously. In this demo, I cheat a little bit. I'm also adjusting the z-index on the LIs, so not just the images, but also the LIs. And as you can see, I'm creating view timelines for both the LIs and images. So to be very, very clear, by the way, this will create a view timeline for every matched subject. So what you see there at the bottom, cards LI IMG animation timeline view, it will create a view timeline for each and every image. So you have multiple view timeline instances. And what you can see on this side as well, we are creating a view timeline instance for both the li and the image, but they're basically tracking the same position. So here too, we can replace it by a named timeline. So we're going to end up with less instances. We say, hey, you know what, track the li, give the name of li in and out of view, and then we can drop our anonymous view timelines and refer to the other one by name. So if we have 20 albums in our cover flow demo, we will now end up with just 20 view timeline instances instead of before we had 40 because we basically had double stuff going on. That's tracking, so that was a demo that is tracking the cards as they are like crossing the entire scroll port. You can also target various sub-segments of that. And it's a bit confusing because some of these sub-segments, they can overlap. You can, for that, you can use the animation range and you can target. So the initial value again is normal, which expands to normal. The one was the start and the other one was the end. And for view timeline specifically, this normal translates to cover 0% and then cover 100%. So the first cover 0%, that's the start range, and the second part, cover 100%, that is the end range. And this is where it will get confusing for you. Thankfully, I've made it easier. I've built a visualizer. So we have a scroller, and then on the right there, you have a bunch of boxes that you can tick so that it becomes visual. So I'm going to show the boxes right here, and now you can see the positions. The bottom one is cover 0%, and the second one is cover 100%. So the cover range runs from that bottom box to that top box. And then we chunk it up in percentages. So the bottom one is at the 0% offset, and the last one is at the top is at 100% offset. And then as we are scrolling my animation, let me rerun that animation. So as I am back, forward, knowing how to use a clicker, no, back, forward. Help me out. Yes, okay. Thank you. So as I am scrolling, the animation will run between these two positions. You can also target any position in between. So you can, for example, say, like, no, I don't want to cover 100%, I want to cover 50%. So we are moving the end position that we are tracking. And now you will see our animation runs from 0 to 100% between these two positions. So the cover range, that one goes from outside of the scroller to at the bottom to, again, outside of the scroller at the other end. There's a bunch of ranges that you can target, and I can give you all these names with all these boring definitions, but I will just show you, again, using my visualizer tool. So by default, we have cover, but you can also have contain, which says the contain position starts at just inside of the scroller, and then the end position of the contain range is also just at the inside of the scroller, but at the start edge. So our animation will run as we are scrolling into that one, and I will show it to you again. I'm changing it here to contain, and look at the animation. The box doesn't start animating until it's at the contain 0% up to contain 100%. We have another range that you can use, namely entry, if you want to do entry effects. So as a thing is entering, the animation will run, and once it has fully entered, the animation will already be done. And obviously, mirrored to entry, you also have exit, which is to do exit animations. So the animation will start as the item is leaving the scroll port at its start edge. So these are the ranges, and we also have entry crossing, exit crossing. I won't bother with you with it today. It's a bit complicated. So we have these initial values. That was a normal entry 0%, entry 100%. We can also shorten this one if we are targeting just the 0 and 100% one to just entry, which is shorter to write. But I like to write the extended version because we can do a bunch of things with it, because we can combine some of these ranges, such as seen in this demo. Look at the image. The image is unclipping itself as it is entering the scroll port, but by the time the image is in the center of the scroll port, the animation has already finished. So it's running from like the entry position to somewhere in the middle of the screen. These are our reveal keyframes, which is a basic clip file that we have going on. This is the basic setup to use the view timeline. but we now want to change the animation range to make sure that we are targeting the right positions. So by default, we have cover 0%, cover 100%. We want to change that, and I want to change it to, clicker work, yes. I want to change it to entry 25%, cover 50%. You might be like, what are you saying? Again, let's go to my visualizer. Entry 25% will be when the image is like partially entered the scroll port. And then cover 50%, that is the final position. So it will unclip itself as it's going from partially having entered to being at the very center of the screen. And I think this is pretty cool. So here again, you have it. I've already shown this to you. Here's another demo that I have. There's two animations going on. There's one at the bottom. As names are entering, they are like sliding in. And then if you look at the top of the scroller, as names are sliding out, they also go to the other end. And yes, these are two animations that I have attached to it. So we have an animate in set of keyframes and an animate out set of keyframes. We are attaching two animations using one shared view timeline, but we are attaching the first one to the entry range and the second one to the exit range. And this is cool if you have like a library with a predefined set of keyframes. You can just pick all the keyframes and add them to certain ranges. Something I also like to do is that sometimes I want to like contain my animation into one set of keyframes, and that is also possible. We have extended the syntax for keyframes. So instead of using percentages there, you can also target ranges. So the first two keyframes that you see in there are for the entry effect, and the second set of keyframes are for the exit effect. And then you don't need the animation range property because the range information is already included in your keyframes, which is nice. A bunch of limitations, good to know. This is going to be fast because basically this talk is normally 40 minutes and I'm squeezing it into 30 minutes and I see we still have 3 minutes and a half. So this is going to be really fast. You can use calcs with the ranges. So here they are using a view timeline, but they are over a shorter range. Whenever you hit the pink line, which is 250 pixels from the bottom, the animation should have ended. And for that, I'm using this. So instead of using the percentages, which are like a position within the range, I'm just using a pixel value. 250 pixels from the start of the thing. Or you can also do something like this, where you're saying, hey, the exit range, take 30 pixels off it, subtract 30 pixels off it, which is pretty sweet. Beware of the shorthand, because you will fall into this one. I've fallen into this trap many times. Well, 3 times, and then I was like, oh yeah, now I know, I should remember this. The animation ranges and the animation timeline longhands are not part of the animation shorthand property. So if you do it like this, this won't work. Because the animation shorthand, which is the second declaration that you see there at the bottom, that one will reset the animation timeline to its initial value. So you need to make sure that the animation timeline comes after the animation shorthand. Same with your range information. You can also broaden the scope of timelines. Like here, for example, I have a scroller, and then I have a progress bar that shows you on photo 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3, and so on. This is my code, which is like, okay, nice. Just follow the scroller. It's not working. It's not working. And the problem is not in my CSS. This is valid CSS. The problem is in my markup. Because you can see that the progress one that we are tracking, that is not a child of the scroller. The scroll container is a sibling of it. And the problem is that scroll container lookup only goes up the Damme tree. This also won't work. You might think, okay, I'm going to move it to the bottom. No, it goes up the containing blockchain to be very specific. So it's looking from a child to a parent to its other parent and so on, so no siblings. Thankfully, you can fix this by broadening the scope of your timeline by declaring it on a shared parent. So on the shared parent, we're basically just using a let, timeline scope, whatever. This is your thing. You get a name. The progress one, which is the one that animates, that one will find it through its containing blockchain ancestor tree. It will find a gallery, and then that gallery will be pointing to the scroll container. So that's how it works. It's an indirection. Supported in Chrome as of 1.16, not 1.15, 1.16, other browsers pending support. Scroll-driven, not scroll-triggered, to be really clear. So this is scroll-driven. As you are scrolling, the thing animates. If you pause scrolling, the thing stops animating. Scroll triggered is different. Scroll triggered are time-based animations that run on their own timeline, and they start when you reach a certain threshold. Cool thing though, I thought about this, like, can I hack this using style queries? The answer is yes, you can totally hack this. This was while chatting with Adam Argyle, a former colleague of mine. So here you can see it. As I'm scrolling, once you hit like a certain line, then the clip unveils itself, but that's a time-based animation. And it looks like this. It's totally hacky. Maybe you shouldn't use this. I'm flipping a bit from 0 to 1 on the contain 10% range, but the start and the end range are the same. So it's basically a line. And once you hit that line, the bit flips from 0 to 1. And then I'm relying on container queries to style things accordingly. When the bit is 0, well, that's my 0% keyframe. When the bit is 1, it's my 100% keyframe. And then I'm using a transition duration to hack the thing. And thankfully, this hack you won't need in the future. We are working on something which is called CSS animation. It's part of CSS animation level 2. It's an animation trigger. It looks something like this. Animation trigger view alternate, and then you can do all sorts of crazy stuff with it. Like it fades in. Once you reach a line at the top, it will fade out again. Crazy, crazy stuff. Syncing effects, and I bet you JavaScript developers will love this. Yes, you can totally do that. Here I have a scroll-driven animation attached that is tracking the pink line, but I'm updating the video based on that position. I wrote a little helper library with it that allows you to track the progress of an animation. I'm taking that progress, and then I'm updating the current time of the video. Same thing here with this 3D object. I am tracking the root scroller, and as you are scrolling, then I am rotating the thing. A more unconventional use of this. Who was here last year? Okay, cool. Did you see the talk on view transitions that I gave? Yep. Yeah. This is a scroll-driven view transition. Code looks like this. Tracking the progress of a scroll-driven animation, and then I'm updating the animations of the view transition. This was a lot of fun, very late night fun. Yes. And then I think this is the last caveat that I want to mention to you before I dig into my closing section. Not everything can animate on the compositor. Be very, very, very aware of that. So if you're doing things like an opacity, yes, that runs on the compositor. Clip paths don't run on the compositor. They run on the main thread. Cool thing though, Microsoft, who is contributing to the Chromium project, they are working on this. So hopefully soonish, I think the CL is undergoing review right now, clip path animations will run on the compositor. Same thing with custom properties. These two run on the main thread, which is very, very unfortunate. I'm pushing to get this fixed. I'm constantly nagging people internally about this. If you want to help out with this, please blog about it. Write posts on social media saying like, hey, I also want this, and then that can convince people. Now debugging, I know that this is complicated, like these scroll-driven animations, all these positions. So how can you more or like better get into these things? In DevTools, we have support for it. If you inspect something, and then you have Shift-Command-P or Shift-Control-P, you can have animations. An animations panel, if you show that one, you can see like the timeline that you have. And you can click and drag it to change the scroll offset. So this will definitely help. This works for any type of animation, by the way. It's not just scroll-driven ones. Like even if you have time-based animations, you can use DevTools to do with that. Thank you. I also built a Chrome extension for DevTools to give you scroll-driven animation-specific debugging things. So there's an extra tab now in DevTools, and if you inspect the thing, you will see. Yeah, this is cool. Thank you. So you will see all sorts of debugging information. You will see a live updating minimap. You can even edit the values. Like, for example, here I'm expecting this thing where it's a clip path. So it's duplicating the clip path on the thing. And then if you hit the edit values one, you will see the boxes. And then you can change the start and end positions, just like in the tool that I've shown you, but now right into DevTools. If you want to know more, short thing, don't worry about it. Yes, don't worry about it. Scroll-driven animation.style, it's your one-stop shop for all your SDA needs. There's also an article that you can check out. If you're not a fan of reading, people like to watch videos. I know, don't worry, I got you covered, because I have a full video course up on YouTube. It's 10 episodes long, it's free to watch. You can find all info there. Go.go. Learn scroll-driven animations. And then a last demo. Sorry for going over time for 4 minutes, I see now. One last demo. This too here is a scroll-driven animation. You can create crazy stuff with this. I'm very curious to see what you are going to build. If you have demos or if you are running into problems, please reach out to me on social media, because together we can build a more rich and engaging web. So thank you.